What's up, Squadron? Aviation has given me a ton of amazing experiences. And more importantly, it's introduced me to a whole new family of friends. Join us tonight because we're cleared direct for some hangar flying. I'm Bryon Dembroski, and this is SuperAero Live. What's up, Av Geeks? It's Wednesday, which can only mean one thing. It's time for another episode of SuperAero Live, and that's right, I'm back in my basement as opposed to being in the hotel last week. Thank you. I saw someone call it Whispers in the Wyndham last week, and that made me laugh. Thanks for tuning in last week with Justin Seams from Pilot to Pilot. Such a cool kind of heart-to-heart conversation we had about airplanes and dreams and hopes. And also, hey guys, sorry we're running late. Sometimes we have to work out technical difficulties. Wolf Pilot, always so harsh in the comments. Wolfie, I love you, brother, but take it easy. This is like a one-man band show here. It's great to see all of you in the chat. Tyler Russell's here. Jonathan Christman's here. Just Plain Silly's here. I heard he looped the Wong Warrior. Plain Lady's here. Whoa, Nick Moore out the gate with the super sticker. Thank you, Nick, so much. That's so epic of you. Previous guest on the show and somehow still comes back for more. I don't want to Whoa, watch your language, Ryan. I want to goof around any longer. I got to get our guest on the show. Everybody, I'm pretty excited. It's Mike Ojo. There he is. MojoGrip's here, everybody. What? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Well, I am doing great because I'm back in my comfort zone. Last week's show was I was like, I don't know, I was in a hotel. It was a little weird. Thank you, Jonathan. You're epic, Jonathan. Thank you for that. Mike, we got so much to talk about, but so I don't even know where to start, really. You are, in my opinion, one of the most prolific aviation YouTubers. Like, you've made like 1 million videos.
Yeah, I probably make more videos than I really want to, but it's become an addiction now, I guess.
So walk me. Let's cut right to the chase. I want to hear about like what's the MojoGrip origin story. How did this thing start for you?
You mean the name MojoGrip, or just my story, or like?
Well, let's start with you, because I think if I've dug back through your channel, and it was not always an airplane only channel. So how did you get into flying? Maybe let's start there.
So, I've shared my story already, some parts of the channel. But, it's like a lot of people, it's something I had always wanted to do. And flying was just, growing up where I grew up and not seeing anybody fly, I thought I would never get to do it. And I remember it was because I got my license in 2016. I had moved out of New York. I moved out to California in 2015. And if you've ever lived in LA, the weather it's like the airplane mecca, basically, because you get to fly out of the year. So long story is I was randomly just watching TV, or maybe it was a YouTube video, and I read about a 15-year-old girl who flew cross country around the country with somebody, obviously. But that story was so inspiring to me that I thought to myself, like, if a 15-year-old girl can do it, man, it's time for you to. And I remember jokingly, I spoke to my girlfriend at the time, and I said, hey, this thing that I've always wanted to do. So she actually bought me like a demo to go for a flight demo. And that was the week of my birthday. And that was it. I flew that first flight, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to come back. And so I went back, got consultation about getting my pilot's license, and I started flying ever since. And then YouTube kind of rolled into it at some point during my training. And now I'm doing YouTube more than I really cared to. But like I said, it's become more of an addiction. So I'm not complaining.
That's funny. You're like, I'm kind of doing this more than I care to.
Right.
So Okay, so that was 2016 that you started
Yeah.
flying.
So I started flying in 15, and then I got my license in 16.
Oh, rock on.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, uh, talk me through. I mean, is it just is it purely a passion thing, or do you have? I mean, like people ask me this all the time. Like Ryan, like what are you gonna do with this? What's the end goal right now for you beyond YouTube? I mean, we're gonna talk about the Sling in a little bit, but
Right. So I like when I think of when I first started, when I decided to get my license, honestly, it was just the itch that I wanted to scratch. And I felt like for me, I'd never been in the position to even afford flying or being able to afford it. And so I was at a good place in my life where I was making good money and things were good. And so that was just, okay, I have the opportunity, I have the funds to do this. Let me get this thing over with in case I died tomorrow. So I know I did it, right? And I remember I actually moved out of LA the same roughly after I got my license. I was pretty much done living in California. And so the only thing that was keeping me there those last few months was just getting my license done. And I remember thinking to myself, after I passed my check card, I'm like, okay, what are you going to do with your license now? Um, but the goal ultimately was to build a lifestyle around flying. And, when you go around other pilots, and I've been fortunate to shake a lot of hands in the aviation community, when I see the way other people are living with being a pilot or having access to an airplane or owning their own airplane, that was inspiring to me. And I always said to myself, you know what, if you can build or tailor your life around flying, see how this thing can actually become a tool rather than just, a hobby. Because, a lot of people get it for different reasons. And so for me, I wanted to build a lifestyle around it. And YouTube was kind of the entryway, I guess, to now what it is today. And as far as like, you mentioned like YouTube and doing YouTube as I'm doing right now. I've actually started another channel where I'm sharing more of my personal story. But before I ever came on YouTube, I had a life. I had things other things that I'm passionate about. So that's still the case today. I do have things outside of YouTube that I do and businesses that I'm involved in outside of YouTube. So
wait, what? YouTubers are real people?
right. Everyone just think YouTube is all you do. It's interesting because when I'm and that's because in a way I do this full time. I literally I commit to making YouTube videos. If you calculate the amount of hours, it's a full time job. But then I also have other full time jobs. But yeah, people assume that this is what you do and it's who you are. Obviously, you're vulnerable when you expose yourself online. So, but for the most part, it's been great support in the community. And I feel like even the growth, when you think of the growth of the channel, I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have the support in the aviation community. So I'm happy about that.
Rock on. And by the way, lots of people in the chat are agreeing with, like, they've had that same experience that you had in terms of having an intro flight. I'm gonna pull one comment out that was kind of funny. Oh yeah, RVN 782 Papa, who's got an RV. You can tell by the name. He says there's a running joke with RVs that you take a $30,000 demo ride. The free demo ride costs $30,000. I think it's that way just with your private pilot, right? Like you take that demo flight and you're like, gotta do it. So I think right. That resonates.
I think for a lot of people, and I use myself as point in case example, it's not like you just arrived there. It's always been there, and then all of a sudden you actually get to experience it, and you say to yourself like, why not? So
yeah, why haven't for me it was, why didn't I do it sooner?
Yep.
So okay, so it's interesting because I have so many questions, like, because you have. I wonder if you've done videos on more aircraft than anyone else online. Like, I think that's what drew me to your, like, the way I discovered you was just like, you've got this like kind of laser focus on being like, I want to be. It's almost like you're like an aviation completionist. You're like, I gotta like see and review and talk about every single airplane ever made. Like, is
Right.
there was that strategy or is that just passion?
I think it's a little bit of both, but it's more strategy. I'll be honest, because like everybody else, and some of the people in the chat group, I also follow their channel, where before I started flying or before I even started making YouTube videos myself, I was a consumer. I still watch a lot of like aviation videos, but I thought of things that I wanted to see. I'll give an example. I remember years ago, I used to watch a lot of videos on the Cirrus brand, and also I remember discovering the flight design CTLS and the Sport Cruiser, and I remember just falling in love with the Sport Cruiser, but the only video available online for the Sport Cruiser was like 3 minutes long, and it was from one channel. And I remember just searching and searching because I wanted to know more about this airplane, and there was really nothing. And the same things, like oftentimes I would watch like air shows. So just like we have, EAA Oshkosh here, they have the European version. I think it happened Germany last, and I would watch those series of videos where people would cover different models of airplanes, but I would want to get to know a particular plane more, and so I would take the name or the model of that airplane, search and search and search, and there was nothing. There were nobody else picked it up, or nobody else decided to review this thing. And I'm also a car enthusiast, and I think of how whenever I want to find out about any car, I just search it, and about 10 people review the same car, and I love watching all 10 videos. So I thought that nobody was doing thought I what I eventually started doing, which was reviewing airplanes, and that's how that happened. For the most part, it was because I wanted to solve a problem for myself.
That hits home to me because uh, there are a number of aircraft that I'm interested in, and I
Yep.
literally all I can find is videos of like people flying them with no commentary at all, or like I'm so hungry for content. And so that's how I stumble on a lot of your videos. It's like, oh, the black shape, boom, there's a MojoGrip video. Oh, the Sport Cruiser, boom, there's a MojoGrip video. So you're definitely scratching an itch. Zach in the chat, Zach Sherman, who I'm sure will hit us up with an epic dad joke eventually in the chat. He says, that Sport Cruiser video is one of my favorites of yours. Definitely the video that introduced me to your channel and convinced me to
Oh,
sub.
cool.
So, boom. There he
Awesome.
is.
So
And Dutchy Girl says she likes the Cruiser too. Uh, is there. Is there? I was gonna save this. We play a little game on the show at the end where it's called Short Final and ask you a bunch of goofy airplane pilot questions. But I want to ask this now. Actually, like, out of everything you've ever reviewed, is there like one that stands out that you? I don't know. Is there a favorite one, a weirdest one?
I I, I have. I'm trying to think like which one made such a crazy impression on me. So I think when I think of just a unique experience, I think of when I reviewed the Super Stole from Just Aircraft. So until that point, most of the airplanes that I reviewed, and I'm biased. I'll be honest. I'm very biased towards like low wing airplanes because that's my preference. And
Sure.
so until I got to checking out the Super Stole, first of all, if you fly like a bush plane or a STOL airplane, kudos to you. That's definitely on my to-do list. I want to own a STOL plane one day, and that was from that experience. And I remember just when I got there, and I didn't even intend to fly that day, but they're like, "You're here, you gotta fly." So when we went up, the first thing that I thought of was literally we took off from the backyard. The grass strip was this tiny, um, but more so after we took off, and we just leveled off so close to the ground. We were like maybe 400 or 500 feet, and I could literally, it was like I could just put my hands outside of the window and touch the trees. And so it was just a totally different experience of flying, where it felt more relaxing. Like when I think of when I'm flying, even when I'm flying today, I'm thinking about a million things, you know. So that experience showed me like you can have a more laid back experience flying a different type of airplane. So I would say flying the Super Stoll Excel was definitely stands out from all the other planes that I flew or that I checked out.
That's awesome. People are asking some questions in the chat that I want to serve up to you.
Sure.
Which, by the way, I wanted to try that Super Stoll. I want to try it out. The thing about it for me is that like when you stand next to it, like like you could walk under it without like the front. It's insane.
It's a sizable plane, but it flies great.
First of all, everyone who's ever met you, there's people who've met you in the chat, and they're all remarking about how nice of a person you are. Brian Singer, I think it's Brian B Singer 339. Met Mike about a year ago. Very nice guy. No one's saying that about me. Okay, other questions. Got to get this in. There's a guy in Atlanta named Nathan who's been trying to give every guest on this show a flight review. So if you need a flight review, Nathan Ballard's got you covered.
Gotcha.
And then here's a question. Where is it? Someone wanted to know when the MojoGrip / Trent Palmer crossover is happening.
Oh man. So let me start answer that by saying this. Like I am a fan of just about every other aviation channel. And I remember when I first started watching YouTube videos and watching airplanes, Steve O's video, I remember watching those. Even Aviation 101, I remember watching his videos early before I even started flying. And over time, as I started making my own videos, obviously I feel like I spend more time making videos now than I do consuming other people's videos. And the truth of the matter is I've reached out, like I've tried to do collaborations with other aviators over the years, but for whatever reason, it just will not happen. I don't know, our schedule, obviously a lot of us, we live in different states. And the only time we probably are in the same location is maybe I'm on that side of town, because a lot of the videos I make, I actually have to travel outside of my state.
Sure.
So if I'm in somebody's state, I usually would reach out, or, you know, when we have air shows like Sun and Fun, Oshkosh, then everyone is in the same place. But typically, even when that happens, usually creators are busy. Like you have people who maybe are busy with their sponsors or whatever the case may be. And if you ever come to Oshkosh, you can never see everything. So my first answer is that for whatever reason, it's been really tough to get together with other aviators on YouTube. But I have reached out. I've been in communication with Trent and other creators. And I remember last year, actually, my plan was to make some videos with the Cowboys. So that's Trent, Corey, and Mike Patey. But it didn't happen. COVID kind of just swung everything left. And also we had some setbacks through the finish line there with my airplane that things just didn't work out. So the answer is it's still going to happen. I've been in contact with these guys, and I hope that we're able to make the time to do it. But I can't say when it's going to happen. But I'm personally interested in doing a collab with other aviators on YouTube.
Well, now you've got like a pretty fast airplane to get. You can just come over to. I don't know if you could land that thing in Trent Palmer's backyard, but
if he has maybe 800, I would say about 800 feet, I'll probably land it there. But
throwing the gauntlet down,
I wouldn't risk it. So
they're gonna scratch that nice paint job though.
Yeah.
Okay. a couple more questions, and then I want to talk about this new airplane that, because you and I, same thing, have been trying to connect for a long time, and you were just like,
Exactly.
hey man, like I totally want to do this, but
Yeah.
this plane is kind of priority one right now.
Yep.
So, and I can't argue with that. Some folks wonder about the name. They're wondering where they get the Mojo part because it's your like Mike
Right.
Ojo, but they're wondering about the grip part. How does that work in?
Yeah. So I've answered this a couple of times before. So Mojo, my initial, the grip part comes from when I started flight training. Okay, when I lived in LA, I was living a little crazy. So I had a car, it was a manual gearbox. I had my motorcycle. As a matter of fact, the channel initially started like a motovlog channel, which I would ride on my motorcycle and make videos. It was a Yamaha Striker. And then I would ride my motorcycle to flight training. So, and what the only common denominator with all those vehicles was in the car I was always like hand grip on my gearbox or gear shifter, and I would always use that to shift the gear. When I'm on the bike, I've got my hands on the throttle again, just grabbing on something. And same thing when I'm in the airplane, I train it in a DA-40, and I would always grab on a stick, and that's where the grip came from. It was like three passions in one, and so I kind of just merged the my initial with that, and that's how I got MojoGrip.
That's what I thought. I knew that, even though I mispronounced your name in the pre-show.
No, you're like 9 out of 10 people who pronounce my last name wrong, but it's all good.
Well, I will tell you that everybody tends to mispronounce or misspell Dembroski. It was
Oh
at a
yeah,
W, or they call it Dembroski or Dembruski or whatever. So we
yeah.
can have a
I
little.
I usually apologize in advance. Like sometimes when I do live videos, I would apologize before before I say to the person. They're like, "Hey, if I mess up your name, that's not my intention." So
It's
it,
hard. It's hard. It's like names are hard. Um, just plain silly. Is inviting you to collaborate with him. He says, I want to fly Mike in my Cirrus. All I need is 18,000 feet or 0 feet, but nothing in between. I think that's like a Cirrus joke about shoots and stuff. But anyway,
yeah, I'm making my way to Texas at some point this year. Hopefully, I've got several people I want to do some videos with, so hopefully we'll be able to connect whenever I'm in Texas.
rock on. See, look at me. I'm like a matchmaker right now.
Hey,
So let's talk about. I want to talk about this sling because I have a lot of questions about it. I think
yes,
uh,
please.
obviously it's been a journey you've been on for a while. I separately learned about the airplane factory. I think they did like a round the world flight a number of years ago,
Right.
and that's how I learned about this. I think it was the Sling 2, one of their earlier models. So um talk me through like how does that come to be?
So, I'll try to give you the short version. So I mentioned that I got my license in 2016, and initially my plan was to get my own airplane at that time. I was able to afford it, but obviously things didn't work out that way. So, and I remember the first time I ever flew the Sling was in February of 2017, I believe it was. So it was like just shortly into the new year. I reached out to them randomly, and it was also for me watching the videos of the round trip where they flew from South Africa all the way to Oshkosh, and more particularly, I wanted to check out the Sling 4. And so I called them up, and they're like, "Yeah, sure, come on down." So I went that day, and ironically I went with my fiance then, and so they showed me around the hangar space. They showed me around the airplane, and just like little things started standing out to me that I was used to, flying the DA-40, which I thought was a pretty modern airplane. And so naturally my brain always said, hey, whenever you actually are ready to just write a check for a plane, it would be a DA-40 because that's where I had most of my hours. But here we had this airplane, which to me, it's actually very similar to the DA-40 in terms of characteristics, performance. But at the time, the Sling 4, which is the predecessor for the TSI, to me, I felt was underpowered. But when I did check it out, it just made an impression on me. Some of the features of it, and also my fiance came on the test flight that we went on, and she said to me in the back, she's like, I could really see us going places with this plane one day. That was back in 2017.
Ooh.
And so I didn't, I just kind of, I didn't think anything of it. But I do remember after that flight, who showed me the plane? Oh, shoot, his name is skipping me right now. But if he's on, forgive me for not remembering your name. But I have his number, so I'll hit him up. But when he showed me the plane, I remember when we got back, I said to him, like, I was asking about the pricing on it, how long it would take, X, Y, Z. And I said, hey, I would love to fly this plane, but I thought that it was underpowered. And I didn't know how they took that. And it was from that day, they told me, well, we're actually working on a newer model that would have better performance, but it's not going to be ready for another 2 years or so. And so that's how sort of the story started. And then 2-3 years later, a lot of things had changed. I had moved to another state, and I remember moving here to Georgia. I wanted to also keep flying a DA-40, but for whatever reason, I could not find a Diamond DA-40 that was close to me. And my plan, now that at this point, I'm already making YouTube videos. And for other creators that are on this live chat, you can relate when, just everybody and their mama has everything to say about you. I've had people comment. I've had people email me just to say something, right? I've had people question, like, hey, this guy's not even a pilot. He's lying to people. I've had everything you can think of said. And I remember even early on, I would make videos. I've made 1 or 2 videos early on with my wife. But when because it's like as the channel grew, the insults and the abuse just kind of grew with it. And obviously I've built a tough skin to be able to take all of it. But I'm pretty sure I'll get way too defensive. Say, for example, I had my wife on and people had something to say about it. And that's true story. That's one of the reasons why I don't put my girls on camera. So, but I remember, so my thought then was, well, if I can rent a DA-40, I'm just going to get a used a used plane. And I was looking at the Piper Cherokee 180. I was looking at the Piper Tomahawk, and I was looking at the Grumman Tiger. As a matter of fact, I was close to going in with somebody on a Grumman, but normally me and my wife would go on walks. And one day we were just walking, and she'll tell you that I just yap about planes all day, every walk. And so I was telling her about, hey, I think I'm I'm going to get a plane soon. And this is just random conversations. So I was telling her, like, hey, this is coming. I'm looking at this plane in particular. And then she just said to me, what about that plane that we flew in California? And she didn't even remember what the name was. She just remembered there was
like your wife. So amazing. That would not be my experience. I love my wife, but she would not be like, what about that plane? She'd be like, what about, we got to paint the house.
Right. She said, what about that plane that, that we flew together? Because for whatever reason, that was the only plane that made an impression on her. And I think it's a win-win when your wife or your spouse, your partner is all in and supports you with a particular airplane. And so I thought to myself, well, that's a Sling. And I thought, man, I never thought I would be spending, as much in terms of investing or spending as much money on an airplane. But my wife, if you ever meet her, she pushes me. She's always like, hey, if you're going to do something, just go all the way in. And so from that conversation, the idea of building a sling was that seed was just sowed in. And it was a couple of weeks after that I reached out to TAF, which is the airplane factory, and they actually told me like, hey, because I was one of the first, and actually no, they reached out to me, and because I was one of the first people they reached out to when the TSI was finally here in the United States. So I'm like, hey, I would love. I don't think they knew that I was already thinking about the airplane. So at the moment they reached out, I flew out to California, and I remember flying the Sling TSI, and that was it. I was like, this is it. I'm getting this plane. And on that flight, we flew to Big Bear, and I think I made a video about it. And I was blown away. I was blown away by the performance of the airplane. And I remember that day it was a full plane, gross. We were full. We fully packed up the airplane. They wanted to show me the performance, and I remember flying out of Big Bear on that day. It was like 8,000 feet density altitude, and the plane it flew like it was nothing. It climbed normal. We were still doing at least 1,000 feet a minute off of Big Bear, and so that flight was pretty much what sold me. And from that point on, I remember calling my wife afterwards. I'm like, hey, this is happening in my head right now. And then I had a conversation, obviously, with TAF. And from there on, we were working together on how to make this happen. And today we got a plane. So
that's
story.
awesome.
That's the true story behind it.
That's great. I feel like we got like I know you've told the story before, but I feel like we got like the scoop. You sent me some pictures. I'm gonna hang on those for a second as a teaser because some people want to say hi to you. IKO4 says, howdy, Mike. I've been watching your videos from since the beginning.
Hey, man.
Parody Show says, love your channel, reviews, style, and humility. Your backstory is inspiring.
Thank you.
Let's see. There's any here we go. This is maybe a good little segue. So Tyler is wondering, at what point did you realize, where is it, there we go, at what point did you realize I can actually build an airplane? And I'm gonna, while you talk about that, I want to show people what this thing looks like. Oh, there's you in front of a Cessna. Sorry, I should have pulled that picture up sooner. Here it is. Like, whoa. It's a good-looking plane. Good-looking guy from a good-looking plane. So you're talking to the airplane factory. You guys are partnering together. At what point is it? To me, that seems just. And this show has kind of inadvertently become like a home building experimental show, like half the time, because I think it's really hot right now. People are really excited about experimentals. Like, what for you? Was that a detractor? That was like, you got to like. Not only do you have to put the money in, you got to put the time in. Like, I'm thinking about that right now. I'm curious what your experience was like.
So it's a little bit of everything. If you know my background, so like way before, and I may have told this story on my personal channel where, when I was a kid, I grew up in a very humble environment, and I didn't have toys growing up, and so I had to build toys. And I remember I used to build toy cars. So I've always actually enjoyed building, except when I became an adult, I kind of went sort of the computer whiz way, not the engineering way. And that could be another story of why I went that route. But the thought of building something was always exciting for me. But I'll be honest, like getting here, a lot of conversations had to happen with my wife. Because I feel like the word experimental, there's a stigma to it, especially in the aviation community. And that's one of the things that I honestly wanted to change in going this route. I wanted to change the story and how people saw experimental planes and the approach of the perspective that the world has about it. Because generally speaking, you think of experimental, you think, oh, it's a guy just banging on tools in his garage. And sadly, when you think of the accident rates with experimental airplanes, it's much higher. And And that's partly because that is the case where you have just one guy or one woman, building an airplane, and and so it's not as reliable, so to speak. But I wanted to showcase a process of, yes, it's an experimental kit, but also you can build it in an actual facility where you have professional builders, you have the right tools. And so that's what I wanted to showcase. So that partly went into the decision, but then also it was the plane I wanted. I didn't want any other plane, and the only way to get the plane that I wanted was to build it. Nobody had one for sale. Still today, nobody has one for sale. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to someone today about selling their airplane, and they would not sell it because I have people reaching out to me all the time. They want a Sling TSI. So the few of us who own one, we're not selling. So, and that was the case. Nobody had one for sale. So in order for me to build the plane, to have the plane that I wanted, I needed to build it. But the experience, man, it's bittersweet. Obviously, kind of working around the pandemic last year, and so it's like also when I make some of the videos that I've put out and with the build process, I wish some of the people who leave different comments about it or share their crazy opinion as to what's happened. I wish they were actually there on the daily to see just how much work and sacrifice went into. A part of me is like, yeah, I gotta finish my plane, but also there was the pressure because I was showcasing this build in front of the world, so I needed to make it happen and schedule myself. And there were times there where I would be out in California for a month, and some of you who follow my channel know that I just became a new dad. So it's like I was leaving my girls, new baby, for a month and just out there banging and working. And usually when I'm there, I'm up like 5-6 a.m., cold showers some days, and building. And part of it was we needed to, or at least I was pressuring them to, look, we have to get done based on the schedule. And just like my approach towards a lot of other things that I'm involved in, I don't like when things drag. And obviously the pandemic, again, just shifted our schedule. And shout out to everyone at the Build Assist who helped me out at TAF, because I kind of pushed. I was really tugging out on them where they really made way for me, and they were able to help me make this. Because if not for that, we could still be building this airplane today. So a lot of things happen in the background, a lot of setbacks. I made the video about just paperwork stuff that set us back like 2 weeks. So a lot of things are involved, and that's part of what I'm doing with the videos that I'm making, is to educate people about the process, or just showcase a little snippet of what it would be like if you wanted to go this route. And hopefully actually we can make the process better, where the process doesn't have to be so crazy for people. But ultimately I wanted to change the stigma around experimental planes. They're airplanes, and they're not cheap airplanes either, compared to anything else you can invest in. You know what I mean? Nope. So don't think that you're going experimental and you're gonna be spending maybe some planes you can spend 10-20 grand, but
you build a fly baby.
Yeah, in the real sense, you are getting more for the value. You're getting more for your money compared to an airplane that's gone through certification. It will cost you at least double to get the same performance, the same capabilities, and so on and so forth. So
Robert, by the way, posted that he loves watching the videos of the build, that they were very inspiring. We talked with some home builders before about on the show about we had some RV. Actually, this is interesting. RV10 Sling TSI, kind of similar in mission. But we had some RV10 builders right on the show, and they were talking about just like how it can be really brutal. And so you took that and kind of compressed it, right, with the being out there in California and stuff. I'm curious, what was like the hardest part? I mean, obviously you talked a little bit about the pandemic getting in the way, but was there like a moment that just felt huge obstacle you had to overcome to get it done, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the hardest part, honestly, was being without my girls. And the plan, honestly, for this year was we would all go out there. Um, but because of trying to have more safety grounds around us, I'm like, it's better that they stay behind. If God forbid I catch, COVID, I could try to recover myself. But I wouldn't want them to come out because of me and then risk their health. So
Sure.
that was the hardest part. But man, I remember, let's see. So I'll give an example. Towards the end there, I would sleep in the hangar. So like if you ever visit TAF, they have like rows of hangars, and they were kind enough to let me spend the nights at there's a room in the hangar, but it's a room over the Sling Pilot Academy, and like these students show up early, and I'm talking by 6 a.m. the lights are on, people are in. So what had to happen for me was either I took a shower the night before, or I had to get up really early, take a shower, take care of myself, and then make sure I'm out of there by the time the students get there. So those were tough. But then also I remember building out the wings. The wings, if you ever build an airplane, or particularly the TSI, the wings are definitely going to take most of your time. And I didn't know that going in, but obviously it was a great learning experience for me. So building out the wings was a bit more challenging. But then also, I would say just the timing, and given that California is 2,000 miles away, I was close to building the plane at a different state that was close to me. Given I didn't have any build facilities out here in Georgia, I did find out after the fact that there's a build facility where they mostly build RVs or van RVs, but at the time I didn't know. So ultimately, I chose to build it in California. One, because I had already built a working relationship with these guys, and they've built these planes over and over again. So hence the California trip. So that was challenging. One, to travel back and forth 2,000 miles, but a lot of little things here and there. But ultimately, it's what I chose, and I don't regret it. It was a great experience for me all around, all with the good and bad.
So that makes me want to ask. The next question I want to ask you is there? I mean, that's obviously a really tough thing, and I honestly, like, I've got two young girls. You're in the harder part. It gets a little easier as they get a little bit older.
I'm
um,
hoping for that.
yeah, one day you're like, oh, cool, like I can sleep a little bit longer.
Yep.
Um, so I totally get some of the things you're talking about there. What I'm curious about too is, um, through that challenge, what was maybe the biggest thing you learned? Like, and I guess it's kind of a two part. Like, I think a lot of builders talk about, like, I learned this about myself, right? I've learned about how I can tackle a project, but I'm also curious, like, anything that you learned from like a pilot nerd perspective that, uh, I don't know. I feel like that's the part that excites me about experimental is you're like in the weeds with the thing that you're riding in a little bit, right? So, well, a lot of it, depending on how long it takes.
Right. I mean, I learned quite a bit through that process. One, for me, I feel like I didn't learn much about myself. I'll be honest, because I feel like I've always been this way. I've always been the guy to try to do the most, or do what everybody else is not considering doing, or trying to climb the highest mountain. So my approach towards this project was that. So it was we get it done, whether high mountains or low, right? But in terms of other things that I learned, one, about the airplane, the TSI, to me, like, just little things, like when you get your hands on and you're building parts and you're being, so the process for me was I was asking a lot of questions. I'm sure that Jean more particularly was probably tired of me yapping away, but part of the process for me was to educate myself on the plane and the build process. So whenever we're building any certain parts, I'm asking, why does this go here, or why is this doing this, right? And he would take time to explain to me. And what I realized, one, about the airplane itself, like it's much safer than I thought. Like, I was joking just recently with someone. Someone came to check out the airplane, and they were pointing to the. No, it wasn't someone who came out. I was out in Florida this past week, and someone mentioned something about the parachute. So, and I remember just thinking to myself and saying to them, like, I don't even think about the parachute. I almost ever. So my plane right now has about 80 hours on it. So I've been flying it quite a bit, and almost all the time that I get in to fly, I don't think about the parachute, which is weird. I know it's there, but I almost never think about it because the plane itself is safe by this design. When I think of some of just little features here and there, I think of, for example, when we were installing the heat exchanger, I didn't know that's how it worked, because your normal conventional airplane, for example, would get heat out of the exhaust. With
Right.
the TSI, it's completely independent from that system. So little things here and there, and then I learned about the glide ratio, which is like crazy. This thing is basically a glider, and that happened when I was building the wings and I was reading the POH. So just little things here and there that I learned about the plane. It also made me feel more comfortable knowing that, okay, I think I made the right choice, and also comfortable knowing that I'm going to be flying my family and friends in the airplane. And then the last in the process itself, and I said this to Taff also. There are some things, because I come from a different world. I sort of come from the tech world where, there's systems and everything in place, and Taff does a great job with their build facility and the approach they go through to help other people build their airplanes. But when I think of the industry on a macro level, I think there's so many things that could be better. You know, so many things could be better. One, about the process, about the tooling, and also about the planes itself. I consider the Sling TSI as maybe the most modern single engine airplane out there. That's my opinion. And so, for example, when I'm talking about the Rotax 915, people may have things to say about it. Like, yeah, it's too expensive, this and this, but have you actually flown behind one? Do you know the features on this thing? It's amazing. Um, so I think more of that needs to happen, and I'm hoping that I can help change more of, you know, what's happening in the aviation industry. Because to me, right now, it feels like it's 80 years old. You can see a shiny new plane from Cessna or Piper, but to me, they're so old in the design process, and also what you're getting compared to any other industry. So I learned more of those things, and I'm actually excited to be more hands-on. And I've probably got some crazy announcements coming soon uh, for my channel that I'll put out. I wish I could announce it here, but I'll put it out in the future. So y'all stay tuned.
What? You're not gonna give me the scoop, Mike?
Not yet. I can't. There's a lot of things happening in the background, but it'll happen soon.
Gary Smith was asking, and that's fine. I will look forward to that announcement. Gary Smith was asking, you kind of hinted at this, but I don't know if we got it. Like, how long did it actually take to build?
About a year.
Wow, that's hardcore, man. That's like,
Yeah.
that's fast.
And again, that's going through a build facility. But you, even when if you go by yourself and do this yourself, and if you actually build every day, it's also possible to build it, within a year. The Sling TSI takes roughly 1,500 hours to build, but mine took about a year to build out.
That's kind of crazy, because I think in my head it's like, oh, if I start building something, it's gonna be like a 10-year.
No,
It's gonna be a commitment.
I've met builders. Some of the planes I featured on the channel, I think it was the Lancer. I featured a Lancer 360 recently, and the owner, Gary, was telling me it took him 8 years to build it. And that's common. I've Early on, one of the early videos I made was actually with the RV10, where I featured the RV10. and the owner I remember said it took him 3.5 years to build. So it's something that could take a long time, and which is also one of the reasons why I went through the build assist process, because it's much quicker to build that way.
A little bit of a backup question, but I think this might expose a little bit about your decision to go with the Sling. Jonathan Christman wants to know, how many hours did you have in the DA40 when you decided to build?
145.
So you were like, that was like that's a fair amount of hours in a type.
Right.
Interesting. I mean, I think that's really cool. Sorry, 72 Papa's saying, I'm going on 10. Whoops, there we go. I'm going on 10 years. Yeah, I think he meant years for the hats that he's building. He's building a hat spy plane.
Oh, okay.
Rock on.
Yeah, it could take a long time. But I don't have, I couldn't wait 10 years to start flying. And which is also why, like, I wish, like, the FAA or somebody, excuse me, like a decision maker from the FAA can sit with these type of interviews, because there's so many things I think we can change in terms of language. For example, like going through the process of building my plane, I remember even saying to TAF, I said, it's not a factory built plane, but it was built in a facility, right? And I think just calling it pure experimental, I think the language should be changed for that. Experimental could be something that somebody's tooling away in their garage or at their home somewhere. But I think planes that are being built by professionals at a facility should change. And I think that would help also change how people see this category, rather than think of, oh, it's experimental or it's bad. I want people to look at it differently.
That's interesting. So you're talking about like maybe delineating that a little bit more.
Right. So I think, for example, like you have certified. So I think you can have certified and then not certified and then experimental. Not certified could be ones that are built in facilities like mine was, and then experimental are the ones that are being built built in a garage or in a hangar. So I think the language will help, because there is a difference. There's a difference in time. There's a possible difference in quality also when you have a team of people building an airplane compared to one person building. Hopefully the one person, see, like a Mike, for example, that guy is a pure engineer. So he can build planes all day, every day, right? So, and I think he's an exception. And I'm sure there's a lot of Mikes out there who are great at building things and at tooling, all that. But a lot of experimental builders don't necessarily have the prior skills to build an airplane, or they didn't come from an engineering background. Oftentimes you may have just your manuals that help you build. And also, when it comes to the experimental category, understand that the manuals are not always completely correct. And you will run into things like, and you question like, why is this way? And even that happened with my plane. And that's part of the community and the back and forth when you're building an airplane. You as the builder actually help the manufacturer to change some things around. If you can build it better, or you found a better way to do something, you can tell them about it and they can update that in the manual. So my point is, for just for the average Joe building the airplane, I think that should be a different category, and compared to a plane that's being built by a team of people at a facility, I think that the language should be different.
That makes sense to me. I can see why that would be appealing. I also think that there's like, and I think you might have experienced this a little bit, right? There's like people who are like, well, like, are you really a builder if it's at the facility? You hear that with people who do glass air, right? They've got the glass air builder assist and they're like cranking it out in 2 weeks. And then there's the folks who are in their garage for 10 years and that feels inequitable to them, right? So I think that definition might be also a way to help Not that
Right.
that's
So
that's that important,
I,
but
I love to respond to that. And look, I am probably the biggest. I feel like Jesus sometimes when I read my comments, you know. But and it's honestly one of the reasons why I post my mistakes, both when I'm flying and whatever I'm doing. Like I've literally had videos. I don't edit a lot of my videos anymore, but when I used to edit my own videos, like all of it, I would see a mistake. I would
mm-hmm.
see something and I would want to take it off, but I'm like, no, I want this to show because it's showing like what's really happening.
Right.
And
So I think
oftentimes,
that's part of why your stuff's great, by the way, because I feel like
right. So I purposefully will put myself out there and be vulnerable to different opinions. But part of the reason why I do that is because when I think of like the aviation community, honestly, it's been great, and I think that I wouldn't even be here if I didn't have the support of everyone around me. But I also think that there's this uh, I'm not sure the right word to use for it, where people kind of put things on a pedestal, like want to become a pilot, you got to do this, you got to be this smart, or and you talk to old timers and old pilots, and they don't care about any of those things. But you do have people in the aviation community who make it harder for anybody who wants to learn how to fly or become a part of the community. They make it harder by their language and the way they can make you feel like, oh, you're not smart enough, right? Or you need to have certain skills. You need to be this crazy engineer. I'm like, none of that is required to actually fly an airplane. If you have two brain cells and you have good memory and you can build good habits, you can fly an airplane. And so that's one of the reasons why for me, I would purposefully put my mistakes on the video because I want the average person or perhaps somebody where this is still a dream for them or this is still something they desire and they haven't actually gotten to it because part of my story is again growing up I didn't have anyone around me who was a pilot or even worse people that I did speak to about flying totally just crapped on it. They're like,
sure.
nah, you're not. You know what I mean? Like the feedback was terrible. I'll be honest about it. And a lot of it even came from friends and loved ones. And the feedback was terrible for me. And that was one of the reasons why it took me 20 years to actually learn how to fly. I've always wanted, I feel like the earliest I can remember having a desire to fly was probably 6 or 7 years old. And because of the feedback I would get from other people around me, I always thought, man, I wouldn't be able to do this. It's not for me, or I'm not smart enough. Of course, I'm not an engineer. So only people with certain skills can actually fly an airplane. And nothing is so far from the truth. And so when you say things like that, and again, you come to MojoGrip comment line, you will see a lot of that where you have so many chair engineers or chair pilots who like you're the one flying the airplane, but yet you have people sitting at home and telling you how to fly the airplane. And honestly, like I read those comments now and it just makes me laugh. But part
I've
of
got
it
those
is
too as a tiny channel compared to your like literally super tiny compared to yours.
right.
I've
And
got
I
I've
don't
got
know
that too,
why
man.
I don't know why that's the case in the aviation community, but I'm hoping to change that too where I don't want I don't want people to feel like they have to have certain skills to be part of the aviation community or be part of the pilot community. I think that if all you have is need is the desire and the means, if you have the means, and part of the projects that I'm working on offline is also to find ways to help people get on that left seat. Also, people who may not necessarily have the means or be able to afford it. And I want to change the tone of the stories that we're telling people who are not pilot yet. Like, you can do this. You don't have to have any type of prerequisite skills to learn how to fly. I think it should be more open that way. And so, yeah, that's my response to comments like that. But literally, I don't respond though. I barely read my comments now because there's a lot of them. But when I do read them and I find negative comments or people trying to teach you how to do something, or saying that you're doing this completely wrong, or they feel like you don't belong in the community because you don't know how to do it this way. And I'm just like, uh, I think that type of language kind of shuts the door on more new people coming in. So, and my hope is to change that.
I love that idea. I think it's interesting. Jonathan in the in the chat was just like, the internet sucks. But like, dude, I mean, I don't know. Like, I've again, small channel comparatively, and like, I remember the first troll I had was like, they just kept commenting in every video about how like they hated my face, and I took it so personally.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Right?
I hate that, the internet just gives an open door to, because I think about it and I'm like, if this person actually met me in person, they would never say that to me. You know what I mean? Like, they would never actually approach me. And I've met a lot of people over the years. And I'm grateful that I haven't had any crazy person walk up to me. But I imagine that people leaving all these comments. Now, I take constructive feedback. Don't get me wrong. Like,
yeah, that's important,
comments,
right?
feedbacks that people have said, even during the build process, I read certain feedbacks and I take those. And even feedbacks about my video quality or something about sound, I take those and I would say, thank you. I appreciate the feedback. So there's a difference, though, in that and people just thinking they have just freeload on you and saying, imagine someone say, I don't like your face. Like, what's that got to do with anything? You're getting this content. Somebody spent the time to actually provide this content to you for free, and you have the nerve to say whatever you feel you need to say. So
just cover it up so you don't have to see it.
You're good, man. I like your face. So
I like your face. So okay, but I want to talk. We're a little bit. We're almost out of. Sorry, we're a little bit out of time. But I want to talk just real quickly about the Sling. Like, you sent some photos over. I just want to end on a high note here. Like, this thing. I mean, can you now? You've got it built.
That's a cool picture. I hope you can still hear me. I can't hear
you know what? I think I switched there. You probably missed my whole cool question. I was gonna say, I was talking about first. I talked about the paint job and how I wondered. I made a joke about how you keep it clean. Those matte finishes are so hard to keep clean. But the question that I asked, you can answer that. But also, I just want to go, what's the coolest thing you've done? I mean, you got this thing flying now. What's the coolest thing you've done? What's the coolest memory so far with it?
Man, coolest memory would be, so I talked about, I was in Florida recently, and we did some formation flying. That was scary and cool at the same time. So that was pretty cool. But then also, I think coming back, so I was in Jacksonville, and that was the longest trip that I've ever done in this airplane, like flying from there back home. And for the first time, I felt like it felt different in terms of I was the only one in the plane. I got to just, and I decided normally I would always use flight follow whenever I take a long trip. And on this trip, for some reason, I just decided, you know what? Because the guys actually clown on me and say, why do you use flight following when you can have a completely quiet and cool cockpit? And so I'd never experienced that before until that flight. And I said to myself, I'm not going to use flight following. I'm going to monitor the radio. And I decided to just listen to podcasts like I would if I was driving. Normally when I drive around, I always listen to podcasts. So, and I remember I was cruising at 6,500. I set the autopilot on and the plane basically was flying itself. And I just decided to put my podcast on. And that was such an experience in itself. Just to sit back, relax, and just let the plane take me home. Um, so I would say that that trip, that flight in particular, was the coolest flight because it felt different, and it actually truly introduced me to the Sling TSI in a way, because oftentimes I'm flying with somebody else or I'm answering questions, but I feel like that particular flight was the first time where I was just by myself, and I imagined this is how I'm actually going to be using this airplane to go places, and it was the most relaxing feeling. Period.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things like everyone's got those like kind of flights where it all like gels together, right? That feels really cool. Okay. Would you be willing to play a short game with me before we sign off
I'm
for the
down.
night?
Sure. Shoot.
All right. So this game is called Short Final, and Short Final is just a minute of me asking you dumb questions and you giving me. You can, I don't care. You can answer dumb answers. You can give real answers. Most, I don't know. There's
Okay.
no
Is it like
points.
a one word answer or I have to it doesn't matter?
There are no rules, Mike.
Okay.
This is a no rules section of the show. You do you do whatever you want. I'm gonna hit the music here,
Okay.
and I'm gonna hit the timer. All right, my Gojo. It's time for Short Final. Let's talk about your favorite. What's your favorite military aircraft?
Favorite military aircraft? I would say the F-22 Raptor.
Awesome, you got a paint job that matches it. What's favorite civilian aircraft other than your Sling?
That has to be probably the PC-12.
Awesome. Favorite passenger you've ever had?
Oh man. So, honestly, I want to say my wife, but then I'm trying to think of any other co-passenger that I've actually would be my wife, because I remember the first time we flew, she was more confident in flying than I was because I was nervous. I was so nervous, and she made it so seamless. So she would be my favorite passenger.
Your wife sounds just amazing. Okay, what about coolest thing you've? I mean, we just talked about like one of your coolest flights in the Sling, but what's the coolest thing you've ever done in an airplane?
That I did as pilot in command or while I was in the airplane.
Your responder's choice.
I would say that the coolest thing was flying aerobatics, but I was not flying. I did puke. I didn't puke, but I was sick to my stomach.
I puked. We're puke bros now.
But thinking about it though, it was such a because when it's happening, there's such a rush, right? So your body is not you just feeling excitement, but then it's when your body tries to settle that it's like, oh crap, what's going on right now? But in the moment that it was happening, it was such a cool feeling.
Yeah, I would say that my experience aerobatics, I get a lot of heat for the fact that I filled 2 bags, but I would have gone up and done it again.
That can happen to just about everybody. If your body is not used to it, and you didn't have any briefing or training before that, chances are you're gonna get sick when you fly aerobatics.
Especially if you eat like a big omelet and a ton
Yeah,
of.
don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Mike, this has been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time tonight to chat with us and to teach us about everything you're doing. I, again, just like also obviously a big fan of your work in terms of the hustle. Like I feel like there's just always it's like almost like daily. I don't even know how you keep up. So I just have a lot of respect for that too. But excited to see what you do with the Sling. If you're ever in Milwaukee, give me a ring.
Definitely. I appreciate you having me on, and I know it took a long time, but I feel good being on finally. So thank you for having me.
Hey, it was worth the wait, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Everybody else. Oh, there's Mike. Here's me. Everybody else. Thanks so much for watching tonight. Appreciate you all being in the chat, ribbing me, giving me trouble, whatever. You guys are the best. Thanks for all the great questions. Be sure to tune in next week. I've got Stay Level Avionics is going to be on the show. We're going to talk about how you can like set up a simulator in your house and all the different ways you can go kind of whole hog on that. So that'll be really cool. So anyways, thanks so much. Be sure to subscribe, share the show. Like 2/3 of you that watch don't even subscribe, which blows my mind. Subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And yeah, just thanks to everyone in the chat with all your support. You guys are the best. All right. We will see you next week.